All right, guys. So our next topic here brings us into the world of Westeros, and that is a Game of Thrones world. If you're not too familiar with it, but we all know HBO has been planning multiple Game of Thrones spinoffs. We've heard numerous reports. There was one in development with what's her name, the blonde woman. God, I can't remember her name right now. She's British. She was in The Ring, maybe. Can't
Naomi
remember.
Watts?
Yes, that's exactly who it was.
Yeah.
So they had a spin-off series planned with Naomi Watts. They even shot the prequel for it and everything. Then they canceled the show. So, which I thought was rather odd. But then, because they canceled that show, they'd already shot stuff for it, canceled it, but then greenlit George R.R. Martin's like backed prequel, which it makes sense is why they would do this one, because George was like actually had his hands involved in this one. But it's the House of Dragon one. We know the House of Dragon one is coming. But now we have word here. Well, actually, recently too, we had the Dunk and Egg thing announced. So there's two shows we know are being in development right now, and that's the Dunk and Egg show and then House of Dragon. House of Dragon's actually like filming stuff and like it's coming. They have cast and all that stuff, but there's these new shows coming, which are actually kind of interesting. So one of them is going to be produced by Bruno Heller, who created the Rome series. If any of you are familiar with that, I never actually watched it, but I heard good things about it.
Mhm.
But his series is tentatively called Nine Voyages, and it puts the spotlight on Lord Corlys Velaryon. And Lord Velaryon was the leader of House Velaryon, who was House Velaryon was mentioned multiple times in the original Game of Thrones series. So if you've read the books or anything like that, you might be familiar at least with his lineage. And then he's known as the Sea Snake and Lord of the Tides. And apparently, a Steve Toussaint is actually playing Corlys Velaryon in the House of Dragon TV series. So it's unknown whether or not he's going to reprise the role, and this is actually going to be like a spin-off of that, or if it's going to be a completely separate thing. I would imagine it's going to be a spin-off. I don't see why they would have two concurrent things going around the same time period. That would seem rather odd, but I mean, this is HBO, which is owned by Warner Brothers, which we know has a very odd track record of doing things. Like, so who knows? Maybe this is a Game of Thrones multiverse situation. Like, absolutely no idea. And then the next one is going to focus on Princess Nymeria, who is also mentioned quite often and primarily by Arya Stark. She mentioned Nymeria quite a few times in the original series with the Sand Snakes as well, because Nymeria was a revered ancestor of House Martell. So one of the Sand Snakes was actually named after her. Her name was Nymeria Sand, as you can see here, which was, I can't remember her name too. What was her name from Iron Fist? I know her name was Connie in the show, right? Colleen. Her name was Colleen.
Colleen, yeah.
Well, I can't remember her real name, but she's who played the Nymeria Sand, if I'm not mistaken here. So that's what the next one is going to be based off of. Now the third one, though, unknown, but apparently this one seems rather odd. The other two kind of make sense. I personally probably wouldn't be interested in developing either of those two shows myself, because I don't really foresee, as someone who's read all the books, Nymeria one could be interesting, but like I don't know if it's going to be as interesting as House of Dragon and how, I don't know. It just depends on what you do with it. I personally probably wouldn't go with either of those two shows in all honesty, and I definitely probably would not go with this third one either. I'm absolutely on board for House of Dragon and Tales of Dunk and Egg. Tales of Dunk and Egg should have been the first thing they did after Game of Thrones. Like it was a shoo-in. It was just such an easy thing they could have done. I don't know why they didn't do that one, so I'm glad that one's happening. But this other rumored third series is supposed to be about the Flea Bottom. This, and if you remember Flea Bottom being mentioned, is pretty much just like the poorest, shitty area of King's Landing, where Davos was from, and where like Gendry was down on the streets. But like when we meet him, like where they were dumping the poop down on the streets. You know, they don't have a plumbing system. The plumbing is just you dump your shit outside. Like, so I don't really know where they would be going with that one. So that one's probably like the least interesting sounding one of the 3 that they're considering doing here, but frankly, like I said, as someone who is actually, like, is very familiar with the Game of Thrones world, I don't think either of the other 2 shows would be very interesting. Maybe the Nymeria one, maybe. But I think a more interesting show would be focusing on, like, the Greyjoys. Like, they're way cooler, especially in the books. So, I don't know. John, as someone, I know you haven't read the books, and as someone who is gravely disappointed in the Game of Thrones series, at least as far as the TV series goes and how it ended, what do you think about this? Is it, do any of these 3 potentially announced shows, they hitting with you, good or bad?
My initial reaction is basically what you said 3 or 4 shows ago when we were talking about the upcoming cast, some of the casting for the upcoming House of Dragons show. This stuff should have been ready to go when Game of Thrones ended.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, it maybe should have been ready to go the season before it ended. I just I don't know. I don't know that I care anymore. Uh, it'll be. I saw somebody recently. And I can't. God, I can't remember where this was. There was something somewhere. Somebody said something like, once George R. R. Martin finishes the Game of Thrones books, it'll be interesting to see if HBO goes back and does like the George R. R. Martin cut of the last couple
Right.
seasons of Game of Thrones, just because it is so divisive, and so many people have issues with it. You know,
That's okay, that's a
I
funny joke, honestly, but, like, I'm again, as someone who's read the books are so drastically different. You could
mhm,
actually go back and do the George R. R. Martin cut, and it would be a new thing akin to the Snyder cut, like, where it's, yeah, overall the same story beats are there, but there's enough new stuff in here to really merit doing that, in all honesty. You'd
yeah,
have to introduce a lot of things if you really wanted to follow it, but
yeah.
it could
Uh,
work. I know it's a joke, but it could work.
I loved Game of Thrones so much up through even the penultimate season. Like, I love that show. It was the last season mainly, and so just the way the characters diverged so much, which we've talked about much before. I don't need to rehash that. Um, but I love that show so much. I guess I'll probably give these a try. Um, you know, if nothing else, I know the HBO's production values are going to be good on them. So you know, I hope the shows themselves. So I'll probably, because I did love the world and everything so much. I'll try it. I don't think the same. The was it WB? Where Deb? I can't remember the guys that create. It's Weiss and what's the other guy's name?
Benioff, yeah.
Benioff and Weiss. You know, I don't think that they're involved with these. So you know, hopefully the the people that are involved with these learn from the mistake of Game of Thrones and not to just kind of fly by the seat of their pants when it comes to crafting the story and rushing things. Like, make, if you're going to make characters turn, make the turns make sense. Make the turns have more than just like, oh, they said this one line back in season 3, so clearly this was a possibility later on. Like, you know, no, like, actually make the turns make sense. Make the characters, you know, be who you present them as, for the first, you know, 6 or 7 seasons.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was definitely I was disappointed with how it ended, not because of the events that happened, just because of it was all rushed. Like, everything was
yeah.
just rushed. I never understood the reason for shortening the last 2 seasons. I think was a huge mistake. Like, I don't know. That's just me. So I hope they. I would have to assume HBO has learned from that, and they're not gonna maybe take their time with this stuff. Because on top of all this, they also have like a Game of Thrones animated series in the works. So I'm right there with you though. Like we've talked about before, they really needed to have this stuff ready to go, especially with like as soon as HBO Max was announced, it should have been launching with their new Game of Thrones title. Because then maybe they wouldn't have to release all their new movies on HBO Max to try to bring in subscribers. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they needed something ready to go, just very much how Marvel does now, you know? Like, as soon as WandaVision ended, bam, we got Falcon and Winter Soldier. Not the same for Disney back in, Mandalorian season 1 times when we just had to wait another year for Mandalorian season 2, but nevertheless,
Right.
they're picking up their steam, and they're gonna have these shows, like, back to back to back to keep you interested. So, that was their biggest mistake with it, aside from completely rushing those last 2 seasons for whatever reason. Though I agree, though, I liked what was it, the 6th season or the 7th season? Whichever one, the penultimate season, I
Yeah.
thought that one was fine. It flowed okay. It was good, but, ugh, after that, it was kind of a mess. Everything was kind of a mess. So I hope they nail this Tales of Dunk and Egg show because, like, everything is there. So, very akin to how Benioff and Weiss, when they had the books to go off of, the show was fantastic. Like, I don't think anyone
Mhm.
would argue that. Is as soon as they got to those last 2 seasons where they had to deviate from the books, so everything was just rushed because they only had cliff notes from George. Like, well, this is what happened, so you just need to get to this point. So they're like, okay, well, let's just make that fucking happen. Like, so, but with Dunk and Egg, they had all that source material is there. So hopefully, whoever's penning those scripts and all that, like all they gotta do is expand it. Like, that's
Yeah.
really it. So, that's the one I'm looking forward to most, so we'll just have to wait and see. But the question is, guys, what do you think about all this? Are you excited for these Game of Thrones spin-off series? Are you kinda like John, like, you don't even know if you're gonna care about Game of Thrones anymore once these things come out? You'll probably give them a try, but they've lost all the steam. There's really no hype for Game of Thrones anymore. Very, very akin. I know that's like the 4th time I've said very akin in this one segment, but kinda like Avatar, right? Avatar's like 10 years too late at this point for, like, most people, I feel like. Like, no one's excited for Avatar 2. Well, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna check it out regardless. Is that kinda where you're at with Game of Thrones? Whatever it is, let us know down in the comment section below.